it's Adam Knox, and welcome to another episode of the Cult of You. I want to tackle something today, and the title of this piece is called Integral Sacrifice. You see, the way I've come to understand it, or the way it really is, in my opinion, is that when it comes to the subject of occultism, magic, spirituality, and especially more of the taboo arenas of consciousness development, there are those that were in the club and those that simply never made it into the club. Most of the crimes, of the dramas, of the abuse of a lot of these principles are purely the result of those who never made it into the club. Let's take, for example, the subject of animal and human sacrifice. This is a crime, let's be honest about it. Specifically, human sacrifice is a crime. In fact, the abuse of anyone should be a crime in simple terms. And there are many that have claimed, or many false supposed occult experts, that claiming themselves to be experts on the subject would very easily pin those crimes, especially in the old days, upon Satanism or occultism or some or another ism, as long as it gives them an easy way to blanket the term, an argument away, without actually having to understand what's really going on inside of the dynamics. Yet, if any of us who are experienced or practitioners ourselves look at these things analytically, we understand simple, basic facts. Firstly, even the Satanic Bible outlaws the abuse of animals, children, and women. So, quite frankly, if someone is committing a crime in that sense, abusing those, that would be a violation of satanic principles. Next would be these ideas of good and evil, darkness, and invoking the devil. Well, quite frankly, again, another incident of people that don't understand the actual mechanism and are simply responding to symbolisms due to ignorance and nothing more. You see, the fact is that in many traditions, when we even explore the draconian concepts, the concept of darkness and light are more akin to the principles of magnetism, more akin or accurately described as the principles in music, the concept between harmonious or angelic and disharmonious or a demonic resonances. The utilization of both being applied to create certain emotional states in the audience when creating emotional experiences in music. But there is more to this than meets the eye. In fact, today I'd like us to tackle this subject of sacrifice a little bit more in detail and also highlight why so many seem to get it wrong and why the constant drama and how we can free ourselves from that and at the very least educate those that might be going through a process themselves. Sit back, relax, and enjoy today's episode, and remember to live deliciously. To help us better understand today's subject, I'd like to begin off by exploring a very well-known psychiatrist, Dr. Ken Wilber. Ken Wilber is best known for his work in the integral system. Integral thinking is a very sophisticated cosmology that integrates fields of Buddhism, psychology, spirituality, and explores even religion from a more psychological framework. It abstracts the ideas and the portions of the mind and has opened many, many advances in creative thinking, as well as business application and just general success in human nature. Now, one of the ideas in this is something known as the altitudes of development. But before we look at that, the idea of developmental stages of consciousness is not exclusive to Ken. Ken has synthesized this in a more popular framework, moving from the archaic to magical levels of thinking, tribal, all the way to integral and higher up. Now, a simple way to understand this, a simple way to conceptualize this, is to look at this at the stages of our locus of control. so to speak. Individuals, when they're beginning their paths of personal development or growth and they're coming out of the world, they usually have what we refer to as an external locus of control. Their sense of self is defined by the world outside of them. They are who they sleep with. They are the car they drive, the place they live. They are defined. Their sense of self is defined by the external world. And we very much move into this and define this as an egocentric space of existence. Now, the problem is with this is we'll find this ego space-centric level of development very much attributed to these lower levels of development in consciousness. So to speak, these more tribal, more archaic levels also operate at these stages. And so too, if we look at the evolution of ourselves as a species, moving from the archaic to the almost magical levels of thinking, where everything had a superpower and another force, and the gods were in control of our lives, to moving into a stage where it became more the tribe controlling and alliance to the tribe and following rules and structures to set in, to evolving even further to a rational kind of orientation. And as this rational orientation proceeded, it allowed us the scientific advances, inside of our experience. And this moves our consciousness further and further inside of the progressional models. Now, this is important for us to recognize, because what Ken did, and what many others have done as well, is they've related these stages of developments to the Eastern philosophies of the chakras. The Eastern philosophies of the chakras, the 7 major ones, can also be linked very much to the planets of the ancients. Another example is Jesus' journey starting off in Bethlehem, or Beth Alehem, that can translate as house of bread, a very appropriate name for the root or base chakra, which is very much orientated to survival. As such, people in that tribalism kind of mentality, that, desperate, that are only looking for themselves, they're in reaction. A very effective kind of definition for it, moving all the way to the more integral points where we can associate to the crown chakra. The crown also where Jesus ends in the final position of his journey in Calcutta, which translates as place in the skull, or place of the skull. This, again, appropriate name for the 7th chakra, the 7th kingdom, the 7th energies. These attributes are seen across pantheons over and over again. And there's a very interesting reason for this, and that's what I want to explore today. And it's the tiers or the levels of manifestation of truth. You see, God, at a fundamental level, whatever you want to describe it, even if we take out the concept of God, which is still polarized to a form of duality, as in God versus the devil, good versus evil, and we abstract that to the original essence of what this is supposed to mean, that which is beyond good or evil, hence the source of both light and dark, good and evil, everything in the universe, the essential creative force, the spark. I speak excessively of that in the Slave God, session. So feel free to go jump and look at that one if that's more of interest for you. But now, moving along, as we progress under this thought banner, we recognize the simple theology that states that there is a force or a dimension of each and every one of us, of me, you, of everybody on the planet, that is shared, almost like a group mind. Carl Jung referred to this as the collective unconscious, and the more that he worked through this collective unconscious, he found the more similar our symbols become, our ideologies, our stages of progression. We understand these from practices in the studies of group mind theory. There is the 100-man, 100-monkey syndrome, which is or experiment that is quite popular, amongst many others, from effects of EEG machines, looking at experiments between people in different rooms, yet having no conscious awareness of each other, yet the brain still calculates the data. It's still there. We're still connected, each and every one of us. Now, the catch is, since we're all connected, since we're all technically one thing at a very fundamental level, and again, I do emphasize at a fundamental level, not at a conscious level, not at any of these other 7 levels of manifestation and development. None of us are necessarily one or even the same at those tiers. This is purely at a quantum mechanical level where we are one, where we're one thing, at that fundamental level seeking to express itself until it begins to differentiate. In other words, until, as we look at every divine cosmology of the universe, the divine begins to split itself as the tree of life begins to unfold into manifestation, into the final, most densest level of manifestation of Malkuth, which translates as the kingdom. In other words, personal reality, also more commonly experienced as your personal egocentric world. Now, as we evolve outside of an egocentric thinking, we come more into a unity of the group or a group consciousness. We evolve beyond that, eventually into a more planetary consciousness and then into a more universal consciousness. Now, these stages of progression are not as easy to accomplish. And the reason for it is very much why so many of us suffer or continue on suffering, as the Buddha describes it so eloquently. You see, these stages of development are not exclusive to human development. They're exceptionally accurate in terms of how we experience the multiple layers of reality within ourselves based upon where we are at. In spiritualism, there's often the description that we can connect with a spirit through the throat chakra, hearing the channeled information or picking it up. But the actual materialization to seeing spirits, for those that can, this is an event that occurs through the solar plexus chakra. It's also because of this that many empaths feel very much a hit on the solar plexus center when somebody slams a door or when they're in an argument or debate. They're very sensitive to this energy center, which is, again, it's a power center because it's the center that moves into the physical world. It creates actualizations. Now, this is also why a lot of old kind of traditional rituals, or what we would refer to as lower magic rituals, in other words, rituals that are more based upon folk tradition, more based upon an external locus of control, so to speak, are so infatuating and so powerful and so moving and can very much have irrational realizations to it. And this is very common, as we can understand, because the more we engage the lower centers, the more we actively switch off the other ones. This is simply because we have a limited range of focus or awareness as we are developing. And that focused awareness can very easily become narrow-minded in a certain structure. Now, the second that structure begins to serve us, that's where it becomes our reality, our personal reality. And if we look at it in a Kabbalistic point of view, we would say that that is then the Sephiroth, or the position of reality or consciousness that the individual is then stuck in. You're stuck into it because you're completely identified with it. In other words, the rules of that environment, the stimulation of that universe is meeting your fundamental psychological needs, and as such is constructing identity to it. Thus, your mind, so to speak, is inside of that spectrum, that field, and it can't see out of it, it can't move out of it. As such, its operating manual is the same. And we see the same manifestation or expression not only of ourselves, but of spirits. If we look at the spiritual construct, fundamentally there is only one being, one God. We're part of that God. Everything's part of that God. So why the polytheism versus the monotheism kind of mindset, so to speak? It is simply because of the stages of separation. I know many monotheistic practitioners that, go to church on Sundays and then worship a completely different God on a Friday night when they're out partying with their friends. You see, the fundamental separation of our spirituality and our reality is a hallucination. Everything is integrated, everything is manifestations or shards, if you will, inside of this rainbow color of experience. Now, this becomes very interesting for us to understand, because what the recognition is here is that the spiritual seeker is one who fundamentally and first and foremost seeks to mature his spiritual self. He seeks to unlock his, which is then fundamentally the sexual self. The sexual self, the identity that's limited inside of duality, he seeks to liberate in order to purify it so it may raise up these higher and higher levels of consciousness, achieving detachment, so to speak, as the Buddha described. But this is a very intricate idea and very important for us to understand, because how is it practical? It's practical in the terms of the old Crowleyan statement, love is the law, love under will. Now, there are many variants of that, and the full meaning of it would take quite a bit of text to truly articulate, but I want to bring it down to a simple biological factor. When you and I like each other, we become like each other. In other words, when we don't, through the act of establishing rapport with anything, whether it's a cosmology, a philosophy, a group of people, a behavior, or anything, we begin to wet wire in our brain by associating pleasure to this thing. The moment we start associating pleasure to this thing and pain to not this thing, as in anything that's unfamiliar to this thing, we actually start to construct a sense of self around this. This sense of self then is where this identity kind of gets locked in. So this makes sense for us from an evolutionary point of view. We understand that we got locked into these various stages of development for security. We needed the tribe. We needed to believe in these cosmologies in a world that was chaos and random, so to speak, try and make sense of it as an attempt to navigate, especially from the brain's point of view that's in this black space trying to use limited data to make predictions of the world around it, constantly finding itself in prediction error. Now, that prediction error is something that we experience immense pain to. In fact, have you ever been in a very beautiful relationship? You were truly in love. This was your quote-unquote soulmate, and that person betrayed you or did something. Not only does that now give you such painful prediction error because you have to reassess how you saw this individual, but depending on how deep that relationship, you may even have to reassess what this says about you, who you are. So all those assumptions and predictions that were made were painful. So automatically human behavior is to find itself in safety. It's to constantly try and protect itself, whether it wants to or doesn't. Many people that, call themselves extreme venturists and things like that, they've just come to establish an identity that is secure within inside of that framework. That's why they have confidence inside of it. Oftentimes from that repeated thrill or rush, which AKA is pleasure, and then the pain of the boredom of not doing it. These same principles underline all human behavior. Now, this means that this is the very thing that keeps us enslaved to a certain quality of life. You see, you cannot experience a different world if you can't perceive a different world. The old phrase, the kingdom of heaven is within us and all about us. Lift a stone and you shall find me, break a twig and I am there, as to quote the words from the Gospel of St. Thomas, the living sayings of Jesus, whether you believe in the Gnostic versions or not. The statement remains quantum mechanically true. Within every single moment, every single probability exists right now. But you cannot perceive it when you're in a place of operation. Now understand that this is not simply a psychological jump. This is a philosophy that the old assassins understood, that political people understand today. In fact, why did Trump win an election when the other party that he was competing against had accurate information? It's not, and people could see clearly this man was lying. It doesn't matter what your standpoint is. I'm not pro or anti-Trump. I really don't care. But the principle behind it is what I'm interested in. The party that was failing in that situation was speaking to the higher values. They were being honest. America wasn't the best situation that it's ever been in. There was all this improvement and stuff like that. But he spoke to the lower levels of consciousness. He spoke to people that were in the Maslowian hierarchy of needs, as simple as it is to say, in a flight or fight and a survival level. And he spoke to those needs. He triggered those lower level needs, and they were more able to animate and mobilize and tribalize and gain the support that is needed to. Now, is that the right way to do these things? That's an ethical discussion that you need to have with yourself. I'm simply laying out the facts. Now, what's important here to understand, though, that is the very thing that makes us slaves. If we do not master these things within ourselves, we remain the slaves to others. As such, the old alchemists and the old spiritualists and the old witches and magicians and everything like that honed the philosophy of sacrifice. Sacrifice had many forms and its translations and ideas, from animal sacrifice, human sacrifice, all kinds of things like that. Now again, I bring this up now after I brought us through that little bit of a process of the developmental stages of things. So no, sacrifice of animals and of humans is clearly bad and very unhealthy, and it's not going to give you the keys to the kingdom, no matter what some stupid grimoire or idiot on the internet might want to tell you. There's no selling your soul for instant success. It's a pop dream that was classic marketing in the 60s, and if you still believe that, then you are exceptionally dumb, and you should just go into a library and start reading everything. The fact of the matter is, there's a cost of exchange of energy, and this is an important one to recognize here. And we spoke about these stages of development. So when a divine mind, or this collective mind, is trying to reach this being, this level of consciousness, it's going to be interpreted based upon the stage of consciousness and development that that individual is in. So when it tries to express this philosophy of sacrifice, when that principle of energy comes about, it's going to express it in the only way that it knows how. And as primitive as it may seem, through the act of symbolism and representation, it works. It works to a degree until the consciousness is liberated from that stage, and then it stops to work. The same way that if you keep exercising, you go to the gym and you keep doing the same type of exercise for your muscles, eventually it's going to stop working. You're not going to meet the novelty anymore. You need to kind of vary. You have to grow. You have to change up the routine. You have to evolve with your system in order to get to the next level. Now, the same thing occurred there. So if your philosophy is still based upon thinkings, if you're still looking at magic and spirituality and systems like that, and you're taking it literally, and then you're judging religious people for taking their philosophies literally, you're no better. The truth is, and if you're watching this, I doubt you fall into one of those categories, because this is not a channel for just people that want to believe anything, but this is one where you challenge thinking, especially your own. The idea here then presents itself that as consciousness evolves, we come closer and closer to the truth of the fundamental, essential meaning of what everything is. And as we evolve through these stages of development, we recognize that we see the same development in the systems of spiritual hierarchies. I mean, let's be honest. How many grimoires are out? How many more are coming? There's a billion spirits, but the thing that's always, interestingly enough, common to them, they're always attributed to the elements, or they're to the zodiac, or they're to the planets, but they're all, or to the tree of life. There's always a hidden correspondence behind that. In other words, there's a lower level manifestation, and then there is a higher level truth or archetype upon which it is based. And the same thing is true in the Magi that begins their practice or their journey. They begin their journey, for example, working through an air or a fire or a planetary element, seeing that inside of their world, and then sacrificing that perception in order to get to the next level. And this is not just something for magicians. This is something that happens to you by the very impulse of evolution. You just choose to do it consciously so you don't have to suffer as long. Because here's the truth. If you put all your faith and love just in that one relationship and it breaks, ooh, that pain, and you get to choose. Do you get to, like, if it breaks, you're like, oh, do I hate this person? Do I hate people? Or do I evolve? What can I learn? What can I recognize from this? Oh, I can recognize that I am capable of loving another person without needing them. In other words, I can learn to value others without feeling myself needing to be completed by them in order to be whole. That is fundamentally part of the spiritual requirement. The spiritual requirement or instruction is the recognition that we are the ultimate divine. We are the one thing. As such, everything we need is within us and all about us. Again, to repeat that same quote from the Gospel of St. Thomas. That means whatever is in our world that we have codependencies on will be stripped away in one shape or form so that we can evolve, especially if we're aspiring to the completion of the great work. We're aspiring to accomplish more and to grow more spiritually. It is because of this that we then recognize the value of sacrifice. You see, because as we look through the kind of old days, so to speak, the more primitive periods of time, the sacrifice, ranged in value. Now, we understand that as modern occultists, we don't do those things anymore. We don't need to. We've attained a higher level of consciousness, and as such, we're able to do more with less, quote unquote. You see, the first stages were the principles of animal sacrifice. Now, firstly, I don't condone animal sacrifice. I myself, I'm a vegetarian. But even if you look at it in context, which is worse? A group of people that sacredly sacrifice a cow, with prayers and offerings and gently taking care of the creature, or, that steak that you're eating and how it got onto your plate by just being compressed into a pipe and basically sacrificed and murdered. Pick your evil, quote unquote. What is interesting, though, is the recognition of that unconscious impulse at the earlier stage. When made conscious, when we put light and awareness inside of a shadow component or a shadow idea, we start to recognize that this boils down to sacrifice of our animal nature. which is essentially the first sacrifice that needs to be made. We begin by sacrificing our own animal nature, our own, sometimes if we take, for example, lust or desire, that need to just have sex all the time, or the need to just eat, all the time, or all those things, or that anger, that jump to rage or anger. All these may give us short-term satisfaction, but long-term, they pretty much destroy our vitality, destroy our physical health, destroy our relationship, and ultimately aren't that good for us. Yet, the individual who is able to sacrifice, we've had everything from that no-fap member, I forget what it's called, but that entire philosophy that's actually more evident in the Tao systems, where we avoid the shedding of the seed, of the releasing of orgasm, and the transmuting of the energy, and we find we're able to accomplish more spiritual states. There's actual health benefits or advancements in growth and healing inside of the brain. If we're able to deny hunger for a certain period of time in controlled ways and fast, we're able to improve our health and our physical vitality. As we overcome these things, these are the real sacrifices that was made. This is what underlines those tones, and this is what is important for us to recognize about those. You see, even the choice in the old artwork of the different animals were symbolic of different aspects of our own psyche that needed to be sacrificed. A pig, quite obviously, for what that may mean, and so on up the hierarchy, depending on the need or the value, the limitation. So all of these were symbolic languages from the collective unconsciousness, very much the same way as your dreams are occurring. Your dreams are a symbolic discussion between yourself and your unconscious or sleeping God. And the more you understand them, the more you understand that language, the more you build the relationship within you and within your own spirit, which is necessary for you to get to the next level, for you to learn to trust yourself, because that's the second sacrifice. The second sacrifice was the sacrifice of others in those tradition. And again, that also seemed brutal. It was, if you look at the old Vikings, it was the sacrifice of someone else for the gods, for the harvest, and it was considered very noble. But again, a very primitive manifestation of a higher principle we now recognize is the sacrifice, or can be interpreted as the sacrifice of the perception of others upon us. You see, if we're always out there trying to be who you are, or failing to be who you are because you're trying to please everyone else, then there's no more originality in the world. Everything's copy-paste. One of the things that disgusts me so much about business marketing out there is 90% of people are just looking for what niches are there. They're just looking for what works because they're trying. And again, as you spoke earlier, that's that safety mechanism of the psyche. So they're just trying to repeat that whole thing. And the end result is that just leads to death. There's no spark. There's no innovation. There's no movement. There's no change. You have to be able to sacrifice the perception and sometimes even the approval of others to follow your own true spirit, to find your own true narrative, to express who and what you are at the deepest and highest level. And that brings us then to the greatest of the sacrifices, the ultimate sacrifice, the sacrifice of yourself. And this is the self-sacrifice that is often so well depicted even in religious cultures, sacrificing yourself for the greater good. There's a deeper meaning in terms of this in the mystical traditions. Now, I'm not putting those down. Those are all, noble things if it's a valuable system for you. It's still a bit tribal though in consciousness, but that's a different discussion. The notion and the thing that's important here is that you establish a very certain narrative that helps you free yourself from it. And it creates this great independence, or this great self-reliance inside of you that helps you stand against the tide and bring about the change. But that in of itself is not long-term sustainable. You see, even that version of you is the thing that then finally must be sacrificed. Your addiction to your own story, your addiction to your own bibliography, your own narratives, your own past, your own drama, your own tainted story, because that is the reason you still suffer. You see, that is also the reason why you bias one group over another, and the reason why your creativity is sometimes lacking or limited, because of that old phrase of that's just who I am, that's just me. You see, You is the ultimate illusion inside of that entire progression through those stages of consciousness and those stages of maturing the sacrifice from the most archaic to the most divine stages, where we get to recognize that our sense of self is simply hallucination produced based upon our process of association in the brain. And depending on how that association is set up, either by ourselves or by others, because right now, if others are setting it up for you, if the media is setting that up for you, if they're making you scared of going outside and connecting with other people and things like that, now I'm not saying don't be responsible, but I am saying be cognizant of how pain-driven narratives and then pleasure narratives and pain narratives are evident of cognitive behavioral conditioning patterns when they are happening. And the only way to free yourself from that is not to burn another flag or cause another looting or, do whatever the lower levels of consciousness are asking. The way to liberate yourself from that is to begin creating a vibrational change and shift inside of you. You see, when your narrative is no longer defined based upon your animal nature, based upon others, even based upon yourself, but it's based upon your spirit, about the shared union of us as a people and as a society, you stop looking for the differences in religion and why mine's right and you're wrong. You are able to take yourself out of the equation and objectively realize the boundless abundance that is this universe. But then you are ready to understand that one of the most fundamental symbolisms behind the philosophy of integral sacrifice is that there's still the concept of blood. Blood was always used in sacrifice, but as any even demonology will tell you, the blood that is most valuable is not from anything else but you. That's why any actual practitioner of that, and again, I draw very clearly distinction between those who are actual initiates of the mystery versus the edgelords out there that think they're the big hoo-ha of King Paimon or something. But, let's be honest. If you're channeling an entity that supposedly can give you boundless kingdoms and wealth, and you don't have boundless kingdoms of wealth, you are not channeling an entity, you're manifesting another form of narcissism. There is a mental illness that you need to deal with. There's a problem there. You're not making full contact, you're making psychological contact, and you're not taking the action that's necessary to grow. So let's be realistic. There's a clear definite difference between the edgelords and the occultists, the true magi that are practicing the arts. And it is essential to recognize that difference. There's a deeper meaning behind the entire spectrum. All the symbols, all the meanings, and all these ideas are symbolic languages very specifically because they come from a time where free thinking was prosecuted. So to take those ideas literally is foolish. You must always perceive the hidden symbolism and meaning, and the only way you're going to get there is by understanding the maps behind by which those constructed ideas were produced in the first place. Now, I was teasing about the idea of blood. Again, to give this indication of this journey, there was in the old days the physical sacrifices of blood. Then further on in practices of spiritualism, it was seen that certain manifestations were produced out of the belly, and a form of plasma was filled inside of the room. Now, if you've ever had a tattoo done, if you've ever had your skin cut and you start seeing it heal up that plasma, that's a substance, it's a manifestation base that can be utilized. So you don't need the others. But what was discovered in spiritualism later on is that neither of those were required. You could simply just if you focused enough intention, enough energy, your body had enough energy available inside of it. I think something like 0.07 megahertz every cell. I forget the exact number, but you have a catacomb of power available inside of you to manifest not only spiritual beings, but alternative realities and goals. And here's the fact: if you're not manifesting your dreams, why are you even bothering trying to manifest the spirit? If you have the power to manifest, use it to create your life. But you're only going to do that through dedication, through commitment, through focus, through sacrificing your narratives, your excuses, your inability to stay focused in the discipline. This is a path of sacrifice, and that is the true meaning of the sacrifice of blood. It is the one of action. It was the same symbol as in any major spiritual religion, that the blood and the sweat was the sacrifice that we needed to make, because it is the thing that says you need to do the work. You need to do the research. There are no quick fixes. Certainly there are examples of many adepts that have gotten great results. But again, the term here is addict. It is someone who has dedicated 10, 20, 30 years or more of their life, has gone through initiations, has understood the mysteries, has researched for detailed pieces. There was no quick fix. There wasn't a power outside of them that did it. It was the power within them that did it. And that power is only able to materialize through sacrificing your excuses and getting the work done. You see, many people are still finding themselves, and you can be a good, well-mannered person, and you can be in a very higher developed state, and you can find yourself moving in down to the lower centers and looking for manifestations. As any addict will also tell you, that your focus and your manifestations will fluctuate. You see, as you begin to bring a certain reality in from these upper, more archetypal realms, it will materialize in your body, and there will be spiritual and magical and mystic kind of manifestations that cannot be explained by the current level of scientific thinking. That is because you're bringing in something new, not studying something that's been. Inside of that paradigm, inside of that philosophy, I just want you to remember one single fact. Let go of the bias. Let go of the he said, she said, my system, your system, and simply recognize that we are occult scientists. And that's the choice. You're either the victim of superstition or you are an occult scientist. You cannot be both. You cannot believe that fairies and things are going to save you and then sit back in your chair. That's the same as those law of attraction people. They just positive think their way into life. No, it's not that way. When you have an intention and a dream that you want to create in your rituals and in your magic, what you're doing is you're programming your cerebral to produce an alternative reality and goal, and it sets things in motion because it energetically connects with everything, because fundamentally we are all one, and it brings those things into place. But once that journey gets triggered, you need to be ready for the sacrifice, and either you're going to proactively make it by working on yourself, by doing the shadow work, by healing, by transforming, by changing so you can be in vibrational harmony with the event that comes, or you're going to just keep adding pressure, and that break is going to break you in order to, because you are the thing that's in the way. So ultimately, I know this has been like one of those, straight on hard conversations, but I don't want you to feel that at any point I'm speaking down to anybody. I'm sharing this because in my journey, the thing that I've had to come close to grips with has been the self-sacrifice. And that's been the greatest cost. And it's also been the thing that's given me the greatest reward. I've sacrificed laziness. I've sacrificed procrastination. I've sacrificed my excuses about my dreams. I've sacrificed old and limiting beliefs. The measurement stick, however, is always going to be the same. The results that you are getting inside of your life, where they are bringing you further or closer away from your goals, because the word sin just meant to miss the mark. So if you're missing the mark of your goals and your dream, that's technically a sin. Just keep adjusting, keep altering your approach, keep doing the work, and get the results. Now let's do a micro recap. So there are several stages of development of consciousness, and we've seen this manifest through the stages of our evolution as a species. And throughout that, what we're saying is that there is a fundamental shared consciousness that we can call God, the universe, spirit, whatever you like, and it's trying to express itself and help this thing called matter in its lowest form evolve all the way up, so these two can meet in the middle. And we can realize what we're about to step towards in terms of the synchronicity, or the synchronistic experiences of our reality in the singularity and many other events like that. It is the time where technology and spirit merge. It's the time where flesh and technology merge. It's this time where we're able to do impossible things through machine learning and artificial intelligence. But the catch is, the more we hold on to our excuses and the limitations, the more difficult it becomes. We need to recognize that this journey and this entity and this force has been coming through us, each and every one of us, since the dawn of time. And it's important for us to build a personal relationship with it and to recognize where we may be at a lower level of consciousness in our manifestation of it or expression of it, and to choose consciously to sacrifice those addictions, those limitations, by thinking them through properly and moving up these spheres until we recognize that it's either together or it's not at all. And any time you're making an operational choice that is simply based upon your group, your side, your thing, you have failed. I've watched many well-meaning preachers on the internet saying things like you should not suffer a witch to live. Not thinking how many people got set on fire just because of that selfless statement, just because they were trying to make some idea for their certain group. This is not a time for individual groups. That is something to be sacrificed. We are one people, whether we like it or not. We're not the same thing, we're different, but those differences are the very things that makes us beautiful and interesting. Come forward as yourself. Recognize all your beauty. Bring all of that into the narrative and stop being ashamed of it. Stop making excuses for it. Instead, sacrifice those excuses. Sacrifice your animal nature. Sacrifice your others, your perceptions of others. And then sacrifice the story of yourself that you were holding on to. And then remember to make sure that that life that you produce from it is truly delicious.
I've always felt a little different. A little uneasy between regular folk. A bit of a dreamer, a lost cause. A little non-ordinary, some would say. I think I've always just been this way. My mother said I was special. My father thought I should be feared. But I knew that witchcraft coursed through my veins the first time I tasted the lips of the goddess inside the rain. Yes, I'm a witch, it's true. And sure, we are the ones who believe in the beauty of nature, who believe in the things science, absent of art, cannot explain, who instead of religion would have romance. And sure, you may think we have lost our way, when in the world of predictable things we have such unfamiliar things that we would like to say. But maybe, in a world so cold and alone, a little unfamiliar is exactly what is needed to show us the way home.
Hey family, it's Adam Knox here. Thanks for supporting this podcast and, these ideas. I really appreciate free thinkers, like yourselves, that are willing to challenge conventional norms and think for themselves and take on new challenges and look at new ideas. And as such, I want to say that if you haven't yet, if you are looking at ways to improve your knowledge over the entire field and you're looking at a regular feed of ideas and concepts to keep improving yourself, I'd like to invite you to sign up at the Cult of You. All my teachings and all my ideas are there for only $19 a month, and every month I bring you a completely new section of some of the most cutting ideas, and I'm constantly adding to that. So I'm constantly reviewing and adding more knowledge as I gain them, and you'll see a lot of the interviews and a lot of things that I do extend on some of the subjects that I cover inside of those areas. I do take quite a bit of effort to make sure that the filming is also quite good, and to give you not just a demonstration of rituals, but also talk you through the psychology behind them so that you're empowered to do them. And I cover every subject under the sun, from science to art to magic to all the different systems out there, from the Golden Dawn to the Western traditions to the left-hand path traditions. We discuss technology and technomancy. We discuss sex magic and seduction. We discuss so much more, from purely the mental aspects to how do you deal with the darkness when it comes up, as well as how do you take those things into business and into your romantic life, as well as what are the keys to make your magic work, as well as to unlock different degrees of spirituality. So if you haven't yet, please consider signing up at the Cult of You, and you'll be able to send me a mail and message there, and I'll be there to help you personally through mail correspondence and chat you and guide you through the entire process. And if you make it through the first year of the entire cycle and you graduate to the second year of the program, you're able to have direct sessions with myself and some of the members of my temple. And I look forward to helping you, whether you go that route or not. Please keep enjoying these podcasts. Please share them with people that you think they're going to find value in them. Like and subscribe to the show. And please send me your messages to info@thecultofyou. I would love to hear what are things that are important to you. What are ideas and concepts that this raised? Maybe this inspired you. Maybe this made sense to you. Maybe this opened up something. I'd love to hear that. Please talk to me and please share with me. Write in the comments and give me your ideas and concepts. If you're watching this on the YouTube channel, if you're only watching this on the YouTube channel, please head on over to Spotify and do subscribe. And if you're listening to this on Spotify, go check us out on YouTube. But please share these ideas and these concepts, and let's have a conversation. I'd love to hear from you. That's it for me. I'm Adam Knox. This is the Cult of You, and remember, live deliciously.